and welcome to Dawa. Tonight I have Dr. Phuntsho, the director or the founder of Loden Foundation, established in 2000 here in Bhutan. And what are the activities that are carried out by Loden Foundation? We'll soon find out from Dr. Phuntsho. In fact, he was talking to me during the Dzongkha session, and there are so many interesting activities initiated by Loden Foundation. But before that, we would like to also know certain things about Dr. Phuntsho. We all know that he's a renowned scholar, a Bhutanese scholar, and also at the moment he's working as a research associate for Cambridge University. So we'd like to know more about him. Doctor, welcome to this program. It's a pleasure to have you here on Dawa. First thing that I didn't get to ask during the Dzongkha session was, you became monk. First you joined school, and then you left school from Yangchin Phu, and then joined Cherry Monastery as a monk. Was it your own decision, or did someone prompt you, or did someone provoke you to become monk?
The immediate decision was mine. It was my own.
Yes.
But I should certainly attribute the background I come from. I come from a fairly religious family. My father being from a religious line. So there was always that strong religious inclination in me, which I acquired during my youth and upbringing. So that must have caused my change to leave school and become a monk. But when the final decision had to be made, it was mine, on my own. I didn't consult anyone. And it was mainly triggered by His Majesty, the 4th Chuk Gelpo's wish to have some school students to join monk body to be able to learn and later teach Buddhism.
Yes. So from Cherry you went to India and had further study of Buddhism in India, and after more than 10 years or so you left for Oxford. That change, why?
Even as a young boy at Ura Primary School, when I saw the Oxford English Dictionary,
Yes.
the abridged version of course, I was always captivated by this really high renowned center for Western education. So throughout my youth, I think I cherished that idea and that wish to go and get the best Western education. But my religious vocation for a while took me away from school and Western education. But towards the end of my religious training, I still thought that it would be good to complement my traditional religious background with a very advanced Western educational skill. So that's what took me to Oxford.
When you just mentioned Oxford Dictionary, it reminded me that somebody actually came and told me that during your school days in Jakar, you always used to carry an Oxford Dictionary in your hand, and every time you'll be going through it. Is it true?
Yes, it's true. I must admit, perhaps it's not the right forum to admit, I even stole that old copy of the school library's Oxford English Dictionary.
Went through all the words?
I used to memorize a page each day, especially as a monk, and we were not actually allowed to spend much time on English. We had a very packed day learning Buddhism. Nice. In Tibetan and Chukye. So I didn't have much time, but every day I used to go through one page and try to learn the vocabulary.
Okay. So studying Buddhism at the same time going through dictionary and getting to know new vocabularies every day. Right?
Yes, that's right.
So after you studied Buddhism in India, you went to Oxford. And while in Oxford, you also studied about Indian religion. You studied all sorts of things as an individual. Today, when you look back, what was your education like? How would you sum up your education? You studied a bit of Western education, a bit of Buddhism.
Well, I wouldn't say that I have done all kinds of studies. Yes, I did rigorous traditional education. And then I went to Oxford, and I must also add again that one of the reasons that triggered me to go from a monastery to Oxford was, at that time, this is late mid-90s and towards late 90s. In Bhutan, some of the new university graduates came back as government officers, and they would look down on the traditional scholars just because the traditional scholars didn't have English. So English was equivalent to education, and whatever profound and vast sciences that were learnt in the monasteries didn't count as education. And I, as a monk, felt that very badly. So it was partly to prove that there is a very profound and very important educational system within our own cultural heritage that I had to get this stature or this advantageous position of getting a Western education to talk to the Western graduates. But then, funnily, by the time I finished at Oxford, a lot of the people from the West, especially people who were following the Dalai Lama in the Hollywood, visited Bhutan, and there was a sudden change. A lot of educated Bhutanese youth started to take interest in Buddhism. So there was no more this modern educated people or officials looking down on the traditional scholars. They actually changed and started to respect the traditional scholars. They discovered that our own cultural heritage and religious heritage has a lot to offer. And that's exactly what I discovered as well. I've gone through rigorous monastic training. I taught for a short while in Asia as well. And when I got to Oxford, actually Buddhism is very similar and compatible with modern critical thinking, modern science. So there's so much we could actually bring together in a synergy from the traditional heritage as well as the modern Western education system. And I think the most important part of my education was, especially from the traditional side, was to discover, to learn that one's mind is the most important factor in one's life.
Yes.
The outlook you'd have, the opinions we have, the state of the mind we have, that is what is most fundamental for our well-being in general.
Yes.
So that truth, I think, of the mind being the primary factor in human well-being and happiness is what the Buddha taught as an essence of his religious teaching. And that's what I still sort of reflect on and derive inspiration and courage from.
Yes. Doctor, one thing that we have realized and we have come across is that there's this belief that Buddhism is understood better in English. Buddhism is taught better in English.
Mm.
You speak very fluent Dzongkha. You speak very fluent Cheki. You also speak very fluent English. What do you think?
I won't actually say that English is a better language for Buddhism. It's really up to one's command in any language. The Indians had Buddhism as good as they could have in Sanskrit, in Pali, in their own languages. The Tibetans had it in Tibetan, and we can have it in Dzongkha. So there's no one language that can be considered as the best medium. I think that is a fallacy.
Your observations so far as a Buddhist nation, how are we progressing on a spiritual front?
On the whole, I think we are doing very well. Among the traditional older generation, there is still a very strong, very stable Buddhist culture. Then among the younger generation, there is a sudden resurgence or revival of interest in Buddhism. So there's no more that early 90s condescending attitude to the traditional heritage. There's now suddenly a twist. Everybody actually wants to know more about Buddhism, know more about our culture. So that's really encouraging. But there are some problems within our society in understanding the Buddhist heritage. I could mention two.
Yes.
One here, I think, people often associate religion with some kind of escapism. When you want to be a good Buddhist, people think that they should leave the world and become a monk or a gomchen and go into a long retreat. Now that's important as well, because you have to cultivate the inner willpower, the inner mental power to be a good person. So for that, sometimes you need to go away from the world, which would otherwise corrupt you, distract you. You need to be in a secluded place to develop that willpower and mental force. But if you have some degree of that willpower, like compassion, wisdom, the most important factor in Buddhism is to help others, especially in the Mahayana tradition. So spirituality is not about running away from real life and living a superficial life. In fact, there are more religious experiences, more occasions and advantages of living in the world and being a better Buddhist, because you come in your daily life, these instances whereby you can sort of reflect and learn from this situation. Then the other problem we often find with spirituality among sort of native or born Buddhists is they see religion as a tool to acquire merit, let's say, sonamsa, so that you get a better rebirth. It's put by one of the Tibetan teachers in the West as spiritual materialism. You're still having this attachment to something good for yourself. You want to accumulate merit so you'll prosper in this life, have a good rebirth in the next life. It's not true Buddhist thinking. As a true Buddhist, what the Buddha really taught is that you should change the mind, the ordinary mind, by understanding it fully and then training it to be a better mind, and ultimately liberate yourself from this cycle of existence. So it's not about getting another better rebirth. I mean, that's good as well, but the true Buddhist practice has to be to transcend the cycle of existence. So spiritual materialism, just acquiring merit through religious practices, is not a true Buddhist practice in a way. You have to really look inward and train the mind, aspire to become a Buddha, to attain nirvana, and that is what defines a Buddhist and distinguishes a Buddhist from a non-Buddhist.
Yes. Doctor, I was going through your bit of background study online and found out that your dissertation while in Oxford was Miffam's Dialectics and Debates, to be, not to be, or neither.
Yes.
I was a bit tempted to know more about this, if you could elaborate a bit.
Now, one of the fundamental philosophies of Buddhism, which again most of us as Buddhists miss and don't even bother to learn about, is a theory called non-self.
Yes.
It basically means there's no I, there's no self, because the whole existence has come about as a result of this mistaken notion that there is an I.
But today everything seems to be I.
Exactly.
I'm more than anybody else.
Yes.
I'm better than anybody
Exactly.
else.
Now this is very profane, worldly. It's something that human beings sort of have naturally because we have been used to this idea of the I.
Yes.
And then also a little bit because our whole modern education system is based on a Western ideology that believes in the I. There's a famous Western modern philosopher called Descartes who says, I think, therefore I am. His whole philosophical system is based on the notion that there is an I, there is a self. And the Indian Hindu tradition is also based on the theory that there is an Atman, a soul. In Buddhism, there's no soul. Most Buddhists make the mistake of using the English word soul. There's no soul. There's no self. It's an illusion. And we create this illusion of the I, and then there is you or he, she, they, the dualistic clinging, and then attachment to what is one's own or what one likes, hatred towards what one doesn't like. So the whole sort of genesis or the theory of becoming, according to the Buddha, is based on the illusion of the I. And we have to understand as a Buddhist that there's no I. Fundamentally, we are just an assembly of different components, psychophysical constituents. So that non-self, as it develops through the centuries, this theory of non-self comes to be known as the theory of emptiness, Tongbanyi, which basically means that there's no real Dawa. Dawa is a label, a name that we give to the cluster of your mind and your body. Now, that should be applied to all the things around us. A car is a name we give to the parts put together in a certain shape. You dismantle the parts, there's no car. So everything is empty of its self-existence. There's no real thing that we can find if we break down the parts. That's the theory of emptiness. But then there are so many different ways of interpreting this theory, both in India and later in Tibet. And there has been a lot of debates on it. So the Buddhist tradition has a wide spectrum of philosophical thinking. So when you take a concept like emptiness, many Buddhist scholars interpret it in their own way.
Yes.
And what I've been doing in my thesis is to study those debates, especially in Tibet, and to highlight the positions, the interpretations that a 19th century polymath, a great scholar called Mipham had. And he played a vital role in bringing up the Nyingma tradition. He criticized the Gelugpa tradition and their understanding of emptiness. But he built a very stable, rigorous system for the Nyingma school. And that's what I wrote my thesis on. Okay. That was a long answer to your short question.
I know. In fact, it was really interesting to go through. But in this day and age, things are a bit different from what we see. That's why we have had so many things developing, people with all kinds of mindset. One would always believe that I exist, that's why I'm better than anyone else. All sorts of malicious comments coming up online because you tend to believe that you are better than the others. All kinds of things are developing. But apart from all this, your Loden Foundation.
Yes.
As a foundation you have established, maybe one of the reasons why you established Loden Foundation is to remove yourself from this I and maybe put the welfare of other individuals in front.
Yes, indeed, yes. The theory of non-self, I-lessness, selflessness is of course directly linked to the idea or the practice of altruism, of doing good to others. After all, if there's no real me, karma, and no real Dawa, we're actually just parts of the whole sort of phenomenon, empirical experience that's going on here. So why should I care more for myself and less for you? And even for the welfare of this cluster of body and mind, I actually should care for that cluster of body and mind. So it's the interdependent theory, the theory of dependent origination. So yes, certainly Loden was a small, modest attempt on my part as well as on the part of my fellow trustees and friends to actually bring out a little bit of this idea of non-self into practice.
Yes. Yes. The foundation is dedicated to fostering a happy and enlightened society through educational intervention at preschool and post-school levels. If you could elaborate a bit on this.
Yes, I started the foundation as a small educational charity, and it actually had a very modest personal beginning. When I was at Oxford, there was a college porter. A college porter is somebody like a security guy and a receptionist in one person. And I became quite close friends with this ex-policeman, a large person from Wales. And he said he couldn't go to school because of economic deprivation. And he wanted to help somebody who would probably also miss school due to economic problems. So he offered £50 a year. And I found a girl for him from central Bhutan and used those £50 to buy uniforms and stationeries.
Yes.
And that inspired some of my friends to donate more money. And I had my ex-school teacher, Ajikunzang children from Bumthang, at that time living in Bumthang and helping me find the deserving candidates here in Bhutan. And that's how the whole scheme began. Then, of course, we started in 2000. And after that, there were other NGOs like Tarayana and Save the Children who did much better sponsorship programs. And now we have His Majesty's Kiddu Foundation, which does much better, much more extensive. So we started to not so much emphasize on the sponsorship scheme. It's our legacy program. We continue where we can, but we don't put extra effort to expand it. Instead, we discovered that in preschool stage, urban places like Thimphu and Phuntsho had many daycare centers, early learning centers. Rural communities didn't have any. But these children had to compete in the same exams at school, the same jobs. So we thought it was not fair. And we thought if we could try the idea of having a charitable early learning center in rural places and see if it made a difference. And we tried to bring together the modern early child care and child development techniques with the traditional upbringing And we have, at the moment, 3 early learning centers, one in Samtsi, one in Bhutan, and one in Mongar. So that's our preschool program. During the school, we still continue with our sponsorship. And post-school is something that we started about 5 years ago. And that was partly because of the success of the school program in the country. There were thousands of students coming out of schools, coming out of colleges. The civil service, which was the main employer, was more or less saturated.
Yes.
The private sector was fledgling, was just beginning to grow. And there was a lot of unemployment. There was a lot of rural-urban migration. So, and as a result, youth delinquency and social crimes. So we thought there is a gap that we could fill in a modest way again. We are a very small charity. And we started our entrepreneurship program mainly to train school and college graduates in entrepreneurship,
Yes.
how to conceive a business idea, how to put that down on paper, how to then come to us with that business proposal, and we gave them interest-free loans. We put them through rigorous selection procedure, and once they get the loan from us, we again appoint 2 mentors. Our office also monitors the project, and we give them a very thorough support and educational sort of backup.
Yes.
And most of our projects, we have now funded 52. And most of them are successful because it's not just the money. The money is just an incentive. We give a lot more non-financial support. And that's our post-school program.
Financial support, like your sponsors, are they all non-Bhutanese, or do we have any Bhutanese contributing to this charity work?
We have both. Most Bhutanese who give us support give them in terms of kind. So mostly in terms of voluntary service. One of the things that we try to achieve on the side is also to promote social voluntarism.
That's
As you know, there is a lot of religious voluntarism. There is a lot of religious charity. But our societies need to still learn how to be socially charitable, how to be socially philanthropic, like sponsoring a child to go to school or sponsoring a patient in the hospital to buy medicine. That's something new to our society. And I think we need to learn. So we encourage a lot of business experts, entrepreneurs to provide time for free, to give our entrepreneurs and attendees of our programs free training. We also ask them to give free mentoring. So there's a lot of time being given and effort being made by local friends. Most of the funding itself came from abroad, from some very dedicated, especially 2 dedicated friends of Loden, who are my close friends, very devout Buddhist as well, one of them. And then we also get some funding from institutions, trust funds. So it's a very scattered source of support we get. In fact, initially when we started raising funds, I used to go out to friends' houses in London and cook a Bhutanese meal in return for their donation.
Oh, interesting. So now, while Loden is in operation, how are things carried out there? Is it stressful? Because sometimes I've heard that when you give loans to young entrepreneurs, they take the money and may not be as effective as they should be while using the money and going ahead with their businesses. But you mentor, yet again, at times things have been difficult.
Yes, there's always challenges with anything. I think with Loden we have existed for over a decade, but we have been a very small, modest charity. We try to be as efficient as possible in what we do, but we never aimed very high and large. We wanted to grow incrementally, and there were many challenges, and we managed to cope with them. In terms of the challenges we face, especially with the entrepreneurship program, we have now 52 businesses. 39 are already running well. Some had difficulties due to natural calamities, due to personal family problems. We try to give as much support as possible to these cases. Sometimes we have difficulties purely due to negligence.
Yes.
There, we use both the carrot and the stick tactic. If people need our support, we give as much support as we can. But if they are totally negligent, irresponsible, then we are a little harsh. We try to be firm. It's, after all, an educational program. We need to really teach people to be responsible, hardworking,
Yes.
have integrity. The whole objective of the program actually is to cultivate a new culture of business here. Because as the private sector grows, there's every chance that we'll have a lot of irresponsible, unethical businesses. So one of the aims we have is we would like to promote an ethical, socially responsible, culturally sensitive, ecologically friendly projects. So we want to create, if I can use the phrase, a kind of a Buddhist entrepreneurship, a bodhisattva entrepreneurship. Something that benefits not only the entrepreneur, but the society as a whole, what in the West they call social entrepreneurship.
Yes, Doctor, thank you so much for your time. In fact, you summed up very well. Thank you so much for your time. And in fact, we'd like to inform our viewers that we'll be bringing a lengthy discussion on Sunday in People's Voice in Dzongkha. And we'll be talking to the beneficiaries of Loden Foundation and some of the young entrepreneurs on Sunday's People's Voice in Dzongkha. Until then, it's time to say good night. And thank you so much for watching. Have a good night. Thank you.